So you guys have not really had a lot of time to look at this, but I'm going to kind of walk you through what this is going to look like. So you're going to see the chairman kind of go through some of that process. And I would encourage you, just based on what you see there, if you have some questions, you all have a placard with your name on there. If you hold it up, our chairman knows what to do. The only thing that I'll tell you is the way that we teach our students, if you have a question, all communication goes through the chair. So if you're having a conversation, you're not having it with the bill author, you're having it with the committee chairman. All communication goes through the chair. Everything is always posted in the form of a question. And so if you're going to ask a question of the bill author, you can ask a question, one, or a series up to 3 and no more. If you ask a 4th question, you're called out of order. That's the procedure. And then you can rise to certain points. There are 3 points. Points of personal information, parliamentary inquiry, and personal privilege. Parliamentary inquiry is just kind of what it sounds like. It pertains to the debate procedures. Personal privilege in a committee is more of like temperature of a room. Like, for instance, if you're in a committee meeting, we've had this at a lot of our programs where they may say, I rise to a point of personal privilege, and they'll say, state your point. And they'll say, is it not true that it's hot in here and we need to put the air conditioner on? Or depending on if our students have had lunch and they come back in and they're really tired and they need to stretch their legs, we've got 3 hours of lunch break. After the lunch break, they may say, what's the point of personal privilege? Is it not true that we should take a 5-minute restroom break so we can stretch our legs? And then the chair will make a rule on that. Or the last one is point of order, which has to do with the procedural facts surrounding what's going on. Some of that is that if this bill is about the death penalty, but for some reason we get off on educational tax credits, you may rise and say, is it not true that the purpose of this bill that we're debating is the death penalty and not educational tax credits? And then the chair makes a determination on that. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. So I'm going to let the chair come back in, take a look at the bill. Again, like I always teach the students whenever I'm teaching them how to write a bill, find something in this to be passionate about. Each of us can look at this and say, well, this is a question that I might have. What were they thinking when they came up with this? Or maybe you disagree with it, and that's okay. Like, stand up and see if you can trip them up, because that's also one of the things.
Trials was having 1 in 9 people on death row being truly innocent before or after their death sentence has been carried out. No one should be put to death or treated unfairly in our justice system because of the color of their skin, inaccessibility,
At this point now that the bill over is spoken, is the chair will open the floor for debate. Now, at that point, what can happen is one of a few things. Someone can rise to one of the points that I just talked about, where they can ask if the author will yield to a question or a series of questions. You do that by raising your placard and saying, Mr. Chairman. The chair will then call on someone, and then you can make that next move. The other part of that is whether you're in committee or in a general assembly debate. Let's say that if I feel like the bill author has been speaking a long time, but I've got something to say about that, maybe I want to answer a question about this. Maybe I've done my research, and I would go through the process of seeking direct permission to speak on this and going through the process. Now, in committees, what you're not going to see, which you would see in a general assembly debate for the House and Senate, is what we call moving the previous question, which is asking for debate to end on a particular bill. So the previous question is, shall this bill pass? So the piece of legislation we're debating, should it pass or should it fail? So the previous question, even you'll hear this in our Georgia General Assembly, shall this bill pass? It's just, should we quit debating on this and actually vote on a piece of legislation that's ahead of us? So the purposes of committee debate, you can ask the bill author questions, or you can rise to points to speak on this. And then you can rise to a point of order and then state your point in the form of an argument. Also make sure that it's not overly wordy. And this is what we tell the students, because sometimes they'll go through like a long soliloquy and then the chair will just call them out of order because they talk too long. So let's go into the actual part of what we're doing.
The floor is now open. He's now open for discussion and debate upon passing the bill. Chair recognizes Ashley.
Yes.
So section 4, you stated that you were gonna have an outside group look at all the cases of those that are currently on the where would that community be? Is that a local thing that you have to have police departments do around the state, or would that be centralized?
Right, yeah, that's a good question. Mostly, they through review the court cases, possibly resentencing, outside groups of interest are mostly referring to non-profit individual groups of parents of children who have been murdered, things like that, who would have either or the ACLU that are opposed to the death penalty. These outside groups that would have interest and good information to request and possible options for resentencing that would want to help together in terms of the whole state judicial system. So that's what we're referring to there, and this usually would happen in the state capitol or around those government buildings. So I'm not sure that it would be specifically localized, but that the local police departments that we referenced would be represented by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, as well as state judicial system representation.
Okay. And also, would this be, so you're saying a volunteer on a volunteer basis, who would
Right, yeah, they can go through an application system, as we've had on multiple bills here in the, or proposed moratoriums here in the state of Georgia, when proposed legislation of formal penal code is proposed to change that. We've had outside groups like the ACLU, or parents groups that have had of murdered children, things like that, that have interests and have ideas about proposing changes to the penal code. We want to have their input so that all the people in Georgia are represented. Thank you.
Or no, right?
Section 4 state that there will be a group there along and moratorium. Can I ask why would it be 3 years long? Why so long?
Right. So we think that is after myself analyzing how long that resentencing needs to take occur, so we make sure that we do the right thing. Because when we talk about people that are sitting in jail or in prison, state prison, we need to make sure we get things right. We don't want to mess anything up. These are people's lives that are at stake.